Episode 31 with Katherine Shai on the 9-Point Start with a Dream podcast.
Welcome to 9-Point Started with a Dream podcast. Our goal is to showcase the stories of athletes and the community that supports them by being authentic about their journey. Here's your host, Jacolby Gilliam.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. This episode with Katherine Shai of LuchaFit. I'll be honest with you, this is one of the first interviews I did when I first started, and figured maybe the best one to go out with for 2018. The reason why, because Katherine kind of embodies what 9-Point is all about, and the reason why I started this, just to innovate the culture, right? She took her experience with wrestling and kind of made it to where she's giving back to the sport, but to give it back to where she's able to help these young girls and women that are in wrestling now kind of carve their own lane, not make it so where wrestling is only about the boys, and not making it so where girls are wrestling the boys, but making it so where women are able to say, we are in this sport, we have our own lane and we can do this. And it's really awesome to kind of see her journey and kind of how it took maybe a little heartbreak and a little hurt and pain think through, life situation to now kind of what she's doing now, kind of building a platform that's really changing the game for wrestling, not just for girls, but just overall the culture. So hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Hey, Katherine, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Hope the weather's great in Colorado right now. Not too cold, not too hot. But
It is. We're lucky we have 300 days of sun. So even if it's 40 degrees, which it was this morning, we have blue skies and full-on sun. So we're pretty lucky.
Good place to be. Arizona and Colorado is where you want to be in life.
Oh, yeah. Love Arizona.
For sure. So I want to get into your background a little bit. So from the wrestling perspective, so when you were a younger athlete, what was your biggest dream coming up that you want to make a reality?
So when I was really young, my dad went to the 56 and the 60 Olympic Games. So a lot of what I knew was Olympics. But at the time, I didn't always know what I wanted to do or what, it wasn't just pre-planned that wrestling would be the way I'd go. So I knew when I was younger, I told my mom, I want to go to the Olympics, but I haven't decided what sport yet. So at least I was given like that kind of freedom to think about what it could be. But even when I thought about that, there were still a lot of other things that I was really into as a kid. I was really into dance for a long time, and I was totally convinced I was going to be a jazz player playing saxophone for a while. So there were a lot of different avenues I wanted to go down. But clearly sports kept winning out, and I just kind of kept coming back to that challenge that sport would give me and that wrestling gave me. And even though that idea of the Olympics was always kind of in the back of my mind, I think I remained really present with what I was focusing on. I wasn't, wrestling in middle school only thinking about trying to make an Olympic team. I was just thinking I'd like to win our league championships, So I think I really focused on little things at the time because that's kind of where I was, and that was, I guess, my thought pattern.
Definitely. So you have this big goal of the Olympics, and so how did you, I guess, align yourself to make sure you kind of position yourself to accomplish, that each goal to kind of lead up to that stage?
I mean, first, definitely having a family that was very involved in sport, because even though my dad had gone to the Olympics, it didn't mean it was going to be the same route. And, the women's wrestling was first introduced in 2004. So there was a long period of time where, I didn't know whether or not that would even be a reality, right? And it wasn't something that would make or break whether I did the sport. But I think my family pretty much, they left it up to me, and they encouraged me to just take each opportunity. So there were a few opportunities when I was younger where, I hadn't made a team as kind of like a cadet age group or a junior age group. And I didn't make, the world team for that age group. But then, somebody said, okay, I'm not going to go to the Pan American Championships, which they send usually the number twos. And then, so I just kept getting opportunities to kind of, here's a trip going on. Do you think you want to do it or not? And I just kept taking opportunities and taking opportunities to travel internationally. And I think once you start getting involved in trips like that, then the national coaches start paying attention, start seeing, okay, here's somebody who's traveling and wants to compete international. Because some kids will go that route, or some kids will just say, I just kind of want to compete on my school teams, and that's fine as well. But I think my parents just kept encouraging me to take the opportunities that were there, and that just kind of led one thing to the other.
Awesome. So as a female wrestler, how were the opportunities? Were there a lot, or were there kind of dig, kind of search for them, or how did that work for you?
There weren't a lot of opportunities, especially early on. In California, that's where I grew up. We were really fortunate that we had a lot of pushy coaches who worked on getting girls tournaments every weekend. So by the time that I was in high school, I was able to compete in a girls tournament every weekend. And so in terms of high school competition, yeah, I was pretty fortunate and had a lot of opportunities, and we were still pushing. It's kind of like every phase. When I was in middle school, elementary, middle school wrestling, I didn't do it a ton, but it was very limited, very, very limited to compete against my own gender. And because of that meant that the next level would have been limited to as well. But I was fortunate that by the time I got to high school, more opportunities. But at the time when I was in high school, a lot of coaches, they were all pushing for the opportunities in college. So by the time I got to college, okay, finally there'd been like a full group who had gone through and pushed to kind of create those opportunities. So it's almost like every generation leads to the next and helps push the next thing. But I grew up around women competing, as my dad coached women starting in the 80s. And so I kind of got to see the progression. And because my family was very involved in the politics, I saw where things were very limited and still today, which is why I'm involved in the politics today, because I've really understood the stages that we've gone through to kind of grow the sport.
So how did you kind of overcome that adversity, kind of to keep going, and know that like people over on the left side are saying, women should wrestle with the guys and vice versa. But how did you kind of maybe position yourself, kind of understand that no, this isn't how it should be. This is how it should be going forward. How do you kind of position yourself for that?
Some of it's definitely has to be personality. I think I have the personality where I'm okay with doing something very different that people, there's been a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, a lot of other, wrestlers, male wrestlers who've been like, what are you doing? But for some reason it has never bothered me ever. So it's gotta be personality for that one side. Definitely family support. And then, because we were so involved, we had kind of a wrestling community with these other women. And I kept meeting such awesome girls who wanted to do the sport too. And you realize like, oh, we're kind of the same kind of person. And I think because we had this close-knit kind of group and you saw each other every weekend and it normalized it for us. Like, okay, we're not like the black sheep just doing something so random. We're all in our element, and it's
this is how it should be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that helped us form like a little mini alliance. And I think it kind of gives you a little bit of power and a little bit of confidence that you're like, no, I have a group. I have like these awesome ladies who love to wrestle too. And, we're all passionate about the same thing.
Awesome. You had your little squad going.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We kind of created our own tribe and we empowered each other, I guess.
So when you were wrestling in high school, about how many states were sanctioned for women on women wrestling?
That's a great question. So the first state to, I'm gonna have to hopefully I'll remember this, or maybe I'll have to pull up all my notes I have. The first state to sanction, I believe, was Hawaii. So right now we have 6 states sanctioned, and it's Hawaii, Texas, Washington, California, Tennessee, and oh no, I'm gonna forget the last one. But at the time I know. At the time we only had about 2 other states, and I'm pretty sure Hawaii was one of them, and I think Texas was also before us. And Washington was right around California. But for California, it took us a long time. We had the numbers and we were really pushing, but it just took a while for things to kind of adapt. But that, it helped when we saw them at the national tournaments, because those states they kind of became powerhouses. Hawaii and Texas, once they sanction, the numbers just explode, and the girls say, great, there's an opportunity and I want to take it. I don't have to fight through the ranks, and I don't have to just fight for a position on a boys team. I actually get to compete against my own gender and be successful. And it's not, it's not this extra thing involved in a sport, where every other sport, you join and you're on a team with your gender and you get to compete and excel. Whereas, these girls in these states with unsanctioned, the sport unsanctioned, they're just fighting through politics. And that makes it very, very difficult to do something that you love when you're fighting through politics, right? Like I was kind of explaining how we had a tribe. We just had this group of girls who, we all got to come together and see each other on the weekends and wrestle tournaments. And when you don't have that kind of community and group, it makes it really hard to say, I'm going to stick with a sport, because you're battling people's expectations and, what they think is right or what they think is okay.
Definitely. So if you're trying to get recruited back then for a college, college team, how is it possible to do that if you're going against men, or how did women go about doing that?
Yeah, it really came down to the girls who were able to seek out the opportunities and go to some of the competitions that would qualify you for a team. So you had to be willing to wrestle beyond your high school season to kind of be recognized, because otherwise, you're just kind of lost on a boys team. And now with social media, there's a lot more available, but at the time, we didn't have that. So you would have to kind of go to these tournaments, and in high school you wrestle folk style, and on, international style, we wrestle freestyle, and the rules are different and techniques are different, but you have to be willing to do a different style. And a lot of girls are very resistant to that. But once you took that opportunity and you went trying to make, an age group world team, then those coaches, that's where they are, because they're looking for the girls who are not only willing to wrestle, because in college, I'm jumping ahead. In college, we wrestle freestyle. So we don't wrestle the same style as high school. So you have to find the girls who are willing to put themselves out there and say, okay, I'm trying freestyle on the off season. I'm wrestling more. And that's kind of who the college coaches wanted to recruit. And they're all NAIA small schools. So you had to kind of deal with what schools had the money to actually do scholarships. And that's why now we're really trying to push to get NCAA sanctioning. And that'll be huge to have that kind of scholarship pull for these athletes.
So why is there a difference between high school and college when it comes to folk style and freestyle? Why is there a difference there?
So it started basically because there were only a few colleges that started women's programs and had kind of recruited enough girls that, they had, a full team of, filling up all the weight classes. And what they would do is they didn't, at that point you don't, if you have a team of women, you're not going to say, okay, we're going to compete against this men's team. You just don't do that. We recognize the differences, and it's kind of counterproductive. So what they would do is they would go to the senior level open tournaments. And so basically these college girls would be competing on the senior level circuit, trying to make a national team and potentially trying out for world and Olympic teams. So they pretty much competed along those same season and during that same time, and just because competition was limited, and all those tournaments are typically international, so you're getting competition, you know, from women all over the world and from Canada, and that was the, you know, the bulk of the women who were competing out of high school. So because it started with those tournaments, it just continued to stay freestyle, and fortunately for us, it's made it very easy to transition our college women to the senior level because it's the same style. We don't have to convince them, okay, now that you've wrestled folk style in potentially middle school, high school, college, now can you please wrestle freestyle and make our world teams and go represent Team USA? Like we don't have that, you know, we don't have that barrier now. So I think it's really benefited us. I think we might have some pushback in the NCAAs because the men wrestle folk style. And people just are hardcore folk style groupies, I guess you could say. But I think wrestling is wrestling, and it's really benefited the women to wrestle freestyle in college. But that's kind of the history on how that started.
Cool. Didn't know that. So learn something new today.
Yeah.
So once you got to college, how was that journey like? Do you still have the goal that you want to make the Olympic team? So how did you kind of go about that process and knowing that you're here, but you want to be there in the future?
So because, you know, once again, college and senior level were still very closely intertwined. And when I was in college, you know, now there's over 40 women's teams competing. So they almost exclusively compete just against each other. But when I was in college, competing at the senior level tournaments was still a pretty integral part of what we did. It was pretty normal to compete at the international tournaments, to compete at senior nationals along, you know, and that would be after our college nationals. So we did have like a regular season where we ended with our college nationals, but it was still pretty much the way to go to compete on the senior level. So because those things were so closely intertwined, I got to know the national team coaches. I would go to camps at the Olympic Training Center because really if you want to get to that level of competing, you know, competing well on the senior level and my goal was to make it to the Olympic Training Center and be a resident athlete, and you have to be accepted to go into that. So, you know, it was still kind of the same mentality of accepting opportunities of, hey, there's a camp, and if you fly yourself out there, we'll pay for your room to stay there. You know, it's still just like taking little bites out of these opportunities. And so it was kind of just playing into that. And definitely when I got to college, that's when it was like, okay, this is reality. Making it to the Olympic Training Center is 100% the goal. And I think because I never thought about having another option, because our options were limited. We don't have the opportunities where we can be graduate assistants. Now it's they're having a little more opportunity, but we didn't have as many like the men have, where you're really getting huge amounts of benefits from staying on as a coach and having them as your training partners. But so I knew that was the goal, and then there was kind of no other option, and I didn't need there to be another option. So it kind of just became whatever it took. And what it took was just, going to every tournament possible for the senior level. So I had, even if there were college, it's during your college season, I still had to go to those international open tournaments because I knew that's where I was going to be competing, for the rest of my career. I have to make a presence there, have to go, all of that.
Definitely. So what year I'm guessing it was after college, did you make it to the Olympic Training Center? Was it 2010, I believe, right?
Right, 2010.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead.
What was that like? So what was that experience like? Were you like, all right, I'm here, but the job's not done yet, but...
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Olympic Training Center is an experience all on its own. You're trying not to be, I guess, blinded by the light, right? Because it's so exciting to be there at the Olympic Training Center. This is where, at least every Olympic athlete will go through the Olympic Training Center at least a few times within their life, whether it's processing or if it's injuries, so everyone's been there, everyone goes, but oh yeah, it was definitely the work is just beginning. I think about 2010, it feels like so long ago and like a different person ago because I've just learned so much since then and so much about myself and my training. And I actually sustained a pretty bad injury the spring before I went out there, and kind of kept trying to wrestle on it. So I entered and ended up having surgery pretty soon after. So my experience at the training center began with rehab. And
what was your injury?
So I had a UCL tear, and so Tommy John surgery.
Oh, wow.
And it was one that I was trying to still wrestle on. It just was not working out. So we went ahead and went the surgery route. And it was a good opportunity for me because the Olympic weights were not the weight that I was wrestling was not an Olympic weight. So I needed to gain quite a bit to be like a viable competitor at that weight class that was higher. So because it was 4 kilos more, around 10 pounds. And that's a big deal when you have women who are cutting down to make, the weight class was 55 kilos. And I'd never weighed 55 kilos before. So it makes a big difference. So I need to at least be 55 kilos or more to, to kind of make an impact there. So my, first 2 years leading up to the London trials pretty much was rehab, get big, and then learn how to be as effective as possible at a whole new weight class. So, you're just kind of like thrown into this storm of, a lot, there's a lot of, it's hard not to compare yourself to others, and not only just athletes within your sport, but athletes in other sports, because now here you are, you used to be kind of like that, big fish in a little pond. And now that's everyone. And everyone's awesome and everyone works hard. So what can you do to set yourself apart? And that's taken years to figure out what I needed to do to not make yourself crazy, working yourself to the bone.
So up to this point, was that like your biggest moment of like adversity, the whole recovery from that injury, or would you say something else was like your biggest moment of adversity?
A combination of a little bit of everything. I think sometimes things come at you in waves, right when you think you come over a wave and you think the sea is calm, all of a sudden another one comes. And I think each time you just you learn a little bit more about yourself, and you learn what you need to do and who you need around you for support. I would say, yeah, injuries are one thing, and I've since had 2 more surgeries, but I think the hardest thing was losing my dad in 2012. And it was right before the trials for 2012. He was pretty sick and in the hospital. He had congestive heart failure. And so, I went out, it was probably only 4 weeks before the Olympic trials, kind of going out anticipating my sister and I, she also wrestled at the Olympic Training Center, was there at the time. So amazing to have that kind of support and someone who'd been through a lot of surgeries, a lot of everything. So, I got to be with her for so much of my career. But, at that time, it kind of didn't matter, and I didn't need to work out. It didn't matter. I was just there with him, and he ended up being okay at that time. But he couldn't come out to the Olympic trials. So, you're dealing with your own expectations, to make an Olympic team of what everyone else thinks. And then sometimes life happens and it kind of doesn't matter for a time being. And, it kind of gave me that power to say, it doesn't matter what I do, if I win or lose, because like that time I got to spend with family was so important. And then June, trials I think were in April, and then in June, my dad passed. And I think building off of that was really hard, because all of a sudden it became like, why am I living in Colorado away from my family, away from my husband, who was the boyfriend at the time. I think he had just moved out, but now he's living away from his family and making that sacrifice to be with me. And it was a really hard few years after 2012, not making the Olympic team, and putting all that work into changing weight classes. The weight classes change again, and then it just kind of started feeling like, why am I doing this? Like, is it really all that important? Do I want to be here? So I think that was the biggest thing to fight through. And I thought for the time being that when I was going to be done with wrestling, that I would want to have nothing to do with it. That, that kind of, it's such a love-hate relationship with sport. I think you know that very well, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so, so sometimes you have to like find a different love. And I think if I had just given up at that point, I definitely would have walked away from wrestling and been upset and torn up about it and felt like it doesn't give me anything back and it's just take. But I started finding people and coaches who helped me see the sport in a whole new light, and it helped me see the reasons that my dad loved the sport. Like, that man loved the sport of wrestling so much. I didn't always understand why, and now I'm starting to get it. I can't say that I get it yet, because he had a lifetime with wrestling and I have not. So, but I get it now, and that's why I'm still so involved and why I'm still passionate.
Awesome. I'm sorry to hear that and just about your dad. But I think it's amazing how like what you're doing now, but I think how your passion is kind of like, in a way, it's like he's kind of giving you that passion that he's having kind of flowing through you now. And kind of what you're doing now with LuchaFit and wrestle like a girl, kind of like you're kind of leaving the legacy. You're kind of continuing the legacy of that he kind of created for you in a way.
Yeah, I hope so. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. No, it's cool. So you kind of hit this, I guess we will say, like the bridge in your life with the whole wrestling, kind of like, don't want to still do, do not want to do this anymore. So what was your next step once you kind of realized, I still love this sport, I want to do more for the game? Like, how did you kind of take that next step towards that?
I think part of it's, I'm definitely a busybody, and I was like, I need to do something, even if I can't decide whether I'm still competing. This was kind of like last year fall, so about a year ago. Still deciding what I wanted to do. My husband and I, new family was on the horizon. So basically just started blogging off of our website that my sister and I had created, called Fulp Allen Wrestling, which is our maiden names. And so I knew I had to do something. And when you've had the experiences of traveling the world, and then, you get such a small opportunity when you go do a clinic or do a camp for these kids, and you see just the impact that you have at those few moments when they ask for your advice, when you show them technique, and they're just like, wow, they kind of are like, wow, I wish I could have you around all the time. And you're like, I know, like, I would love to work with you all the time or give you more, but I don't know, you want my email? It's just, it's so hard to try and like further a connection, because you just have a short time with people, and it's not easy to just email somebody a bunch of questions. So I knew that I had something to give, and I felt like I had a way that I could explain to people about my experiences. So Fulp Allen Wrestling turned into LuchaFit, and Lucha means to struggle, to fight, and to wrestle. And it's in the wrestling world, we hear it very often when the coaches in the corner telling their athletes, lucha, lucha, lucha. So I was like, okay, something we hear all the time. So I wanted to connect that wrestler mentality with also just like being just life fitness. Cause I believe that once you are an athlete, you kind of incorporate that into your life. So LuchaFit is advice for athletes in general as well. I definitely focus on wrestlers and female wrestlers because we just don't have a lot of resources, and there's hardly anything out there when you start searching, okay, I'm a beginner female wrestler, what do I do, what do I wear, what should I bring, all this stuff. So that's kind of where LuchaFit was born, and it's been pretty exciting to get a lot of awesome feedback from excited parents and athletes.
So, because I'm kind of new to the wrestling and the female wrestling in general, so I guess like before LuchaFit came along, like was there any other resources to help female athletes like wrestlers and kind of understand the sport any better?
Definitely not. Anything that you search, it's either going to be, WWE.
Yeah.
Helpful.
For sure.
Or it's like an article about how, oh, just so you know, there's girls and women who wrestle now. And you're like, okay, that's great. Like I do. So can you give me some more information? And it's usually written by a male talking about how, it's not just for boys anymore. That's like the total stereotypical statement, right? So no, the clean answer to that is no, nothing.
So going forward, I guess like what is your big mission with LuchaFit? Where do you want to see this in a few years or in a month or two? Like, just like what's your big picture for this?
I hope that it's something that I can kind of continue to give back, like on the next level. Like kind of like this first level is giving back to those beginner athletes and those athletes looking for advice from an elite athlete. And I'm hoping the next phase is that LuchaFit can be something where female wrestlers can have a place where they can come back and they can write and LuchaFit could pay them to do that. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for the next stage. And also, then it doesn't just become me writing everything. Now we have a lot of different opinions from a lot of different women, and it's something that's like potentially, I don't know if it's a full-on career for women, but it's a way that they can make an impact and that they could actually get paid for. So that's kind of the next mission. And it could kind of evolve in a lot of different ways, and I'm probably going to have to let fate decide some of that, because I think there's so many different ways that we can impact sport in general. I mean, with what you're doing, and just a lot of the people that you and I have been connecting with who are finding kind of unique ways to connect with people in sports. So some of it I kind of have to let the paths, connections, and figure out what the best way and what people want. That's a big part. Definitely. What people want, what people need. So
definitely. So if we have a girl listening right now who wants to get involved with wrestling, what would you say would be her first step to really maybe understand the sport a little bit, or like where's the first place to start?
I would say the first place to start would be at LuchaFit.
There we go.
And so that you can kind of, start seeing what are the types of things that, we actually talk about in reference to the sport. And I have a lot of basic things about how to pack your bag for a competition and the food to bring. So there's a lot of basic stuff like that. But, a lot of people end up kind of finding the outlier, the one girl who's wrestling the boys, the girl who's being on the boys. And, that's, I don't think that that's necessarily a standard that all of our beginner female wrestlers entering the sport should have, that they need to go out there and throw a boy and pin him. Like, I just don't think that that's really realistic. That's not who I was, for sure. Like, I was not the girl just like beating up all the boys. I kind of like won and lost, and even against the women, so I don't think that that's like the end all be all. I think if a female wrestler really wants to understand and see what women's wrestling looks like, you have to watch our senior level women. So you have to look at USA Wrestling and videos of women who are competing against their own gender and doing really amazing big things. So, following our national team members and our Olympic members, and we have an awesome little social media group, but I don't think that all these girls really realize that we're out there and we're, so willing to honestly give them anything. Like, wrestling's such a tight-knit community that anytime a girl messages me, I personally message them back all this advice and, whatever they're asking me. And all the women will do that. All the national team, world, and Olympic team members will do that. And so I think it's something to recognize that when you join the sport, it's a little community and everyone's kind of there for each other.
Definitely. That's great. So I remember you talking about earlier is how right now there's a lot of politics going on in the sport, and like not every state is sanctioned to have women-on-women wrestling. So for that girl that's out there that have to wrestle the guys, will be your advice for her, just or something that they can kind of help do to kind of help get the push going for women-on-women wrestling in other states as well?
Yeah. Well, first off, it's a tough situation for sure. A lot of us, we've all had to wrestle the boys, and it's not easy. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. If you win, it's like, you're praised and it's amazing. And then, if you lose, it doesn't really matter. But then if you go and lose to a girl, you go to a national competition where these girls are tough. Like, these girls are also wrestling boys. Everyone says, well, the boys make you tougher. Well, okay, then all these girls are wrestling the boys and they're coming to national competition. A lot of girls, I've heard this example so many times, they're beating up the boys in their league and in their, within their team. And they go and they lose to girls and everyone is like, I can't believe you lost to a girl. And that's so terrible. It's terrible that the standard of, a tough competitor is only a boy, that you can't find another female nationally, that you could lose to. So first, you're going to have to be tougher than those critics. And I think we've all had critics. And, I've certainly had people who said there's no way you can compete at, try and make an Olympic team and then have only competed against girls in high school. They were like, you can't do it. It won't work. You won't be tough enough. We've all had those kind of negative voices around us. But I think pushing and trying to have girls join your team, that's going to be big because states are looking at the numbers. They want to see that girls want to join the sport. It's kind of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. So unfortunately, we need a lot of numbers and a lot of girls who are willing to compete against the boys before they say, okay, like, we'll give you this, we'll make it your own sport against your own gender. But otherwise, you have to be willing to step out and be brave and go compete against girls nationally and be okay with losing if that's what happens, because that's going to help increase your opportunities.
For sure. Awesome. So is there any that maybe, I don't know, site to go to that kind of help give insight on whether, on how to, get it sanctioned, or just like more of just, you just kind of just add the numbers up and just go from there?
So, for people looking for information, there's quite a few different spots. So first, Wrestle Like a Girl, which I'm a board member of, we are helping push the efforts and working with organizations and states to see what do they need to get the sport sanctioned within their state. And then, so that's wrestlelikeagirl.org. And then you have USA Wrestling, and they have a resource page. I believe it's in the women's wrestling section that they have. It's a resource page, and it's pretty much, if states are looking for information about how those other 6 states have sanctioned the sport, that's where you look for. And then the other thing that you can do is Facebook has almost every single state with a page that's, Illinois women's wrestling and Alabama women's wrestling and Kansas. Almost every single state has a page, and those coaches and parents and everyone's kind of talking about how to get involved. So that would be your next best bet.
Awesome. So we're going to kind of wrapping up a little bit. So if someone's listening right now, what will be your biggest advice on how to, I guess, overcome any adversity that you may face, when it comes to being a female in sports or just being in sports in general? Like, what advice you kind of say to kind of to keep fighting or just kind of overcome it, kind of keep your end goal in mind like you did?
I think if it's something that you really want to do, and you're excited and passionate about the sport, you have to just know and recognize that there's going to be naysayers, and it doesn't have anything to do with you. And if it's something that you really want to do, you have to just keep pushing forward. And there's going to be extremely tough times. But I think almost everyone who, around our age, who's competed in sport for years and years and years, we can all say that it's always worth it. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we've all learned from sport, is that pushing through those terrible, hard times, the injuries, the hardship, family stuff, it ends up being worth it, because you've built this community of people who are standing by you. And then hopefully you kind of become an expert in your field, and you can give back, because at that point it's kind of your, I don't want to say obligation, but it really is a disservice if you're not in the position to want to give back, because you become an expert in your field, and there's younger people out there who want to look up to you. People are just begging to have somebody to look up to, and that could be you. And that could be you if you keep pushing through and stick it out.
Oh, that's so true. 'Cause I think a lot of athletes, they don't realize that the platform they have, they can really make a difference in maybe just one kid's life, or just two or three, and it kind of adds and just trickle down over years. They kind of learn, and just, I think it's great that you say that. Like, just use your platform to really, to make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So where can people find more about you, Katherine, and LuchaFit and what you're up to?
Yes.
Social media.
Yeah, social media, all over social media. So Facebook is LuchaFit. My personal one, my Facebook page is Fulp Allen Wrestling, and I post a lot there, kind of about it's more my personal stuff, and along with Twitter and Facebook, or Twitter and Instagram is the same thing. And then LuchaFit on Instagram, it's lucha.fit. Twitter, it's just LuchaFit, and then my website, luchafit.com, and you'll kind of find everything on there. Hopefully I've connected it all well enough that you can find everything. So.
And I'll leave some links too in the bottom of this, so it kind of makes it a little bit easier too, so we can make sure people kind of learn more about what you're doing and what you're up to.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. So thanks for having you on. I think we kind of learned a lot just about your journey and how to kind of approach life and just what your passions are. So I just want to thank you for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yo, thanks for listening to this episode of the 9 Point Started With a Dream podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, leave a review. We would love to hear your thoughts. You can find more athlete-driven content at 9point.com. Till the next episode, you're only one opportunity away. Peace.